Hello, everyone, and welcome to the vBrownBag. We've got a great show for you tonight. We've got Taylor Riggan. How are you doing, Taylor?
Doing well, Jonathan.
Tonight we're going to cover, the title is Git Ops and Shape for DevOps. You want to give us the 30,000 foot view of what you're going to talk about?
Sure. Ultimately, there are a lot of ops guys out there like myself that are kind of getting into the DevOpsy kind of world and working more with application developers. So this is kind of a track that takes the ops folks down the path of where to get started, right? What tools should they use and where should they go for resources and things of that nature, so they can actually get started in the ecosystem that their application developer counterparts are already playing in. So we're going to kind of go down that path and start with a tool that most app developers are already very familiar with, in Git, and show ops folks how powerful that tool can be just in their regular day-to-day jobs.
Awesome. Got a few show notes before I make you presenter. For folks that are listening in live, you can tweet us at vBrownBag or using the vBrownBag hashtag on Twitter. Of course, you can always engage with us there anytime after the show. We'll have these posted to iTunes and YouTube for you to watch later on. We've got our live shows in APAC, EMEA, and Latin America, in addition to the US show every week. APAC's running every 2 weeks. You can follow Taylor at @TRiggan on Twitter. Tonight, hosting Taylor, we've got Cody Bunch. Howdy, Cody.
Good morning.
Good morning to you. Cody, of course, you can follow at Cody_Bunch. And my name's Jonathan Frappier. You can follow me at JFrappier on Twitter. And I think I've got one more set of show notes that normally comes up this time of year. I don't remember if I included it. There's normally something we do, right, Cody? Am I forgetting something?
Generally around this time of year, I think we do, yeah.
Oh, yeah. End of year
Oh, there
giveaway.
we are.
There we are. So we've got a ton of great sponsors and prizes again. So huge shout out to all of our sponsors, Drobo, WEI, Rubric, everyone that sponsored and contributed prizes to this. So these are prizes that all of these sponsors have donated. And as soon as I pass the presenter mode over to Taylor, I'll hit publish and you will have the link to start signing up for that. We're running actually, since Christmas falls on a weekend this year. We're going a little bit later than we normally do. We're going right to the 21st of December this year. So we've got 4 shows, including this one before we wrap up for the year for 2016. So you'll have 4 weeks to sign up for the prizes. We've got another screen here. So just a lot of cool prizes, home NASs, hard drives, Raspberry Pis, books for those that are studying for certification. For all the folks that missed out on Migrate to VCSA shirts, Ahmad, who's part of the vBrownBag crew, is got some of those for folks that want to win if you weren't able to attend VMworld US or EMEA this year. So a lot of great stuff. And I guess since it's the 30th, tomorrow's the 1st, we also start Commitmas. So Taylor's talk tonight is no mistake. Commitmas this year, we've got a new repo up, return of Commitmas. So this is the 3rd year we've done it now. Last year, somebody who I won't name that's also on this call, yeah, okay, suggested maybe we do a live show every single night for the month of December, which we actually did and was pretty awesome. So there's a ton of great content from last year if you're new to Git. After you watch tonight, if you want to learn some of the basics, how to install it, start creating repos, we've got links out there on the Return of Commitmas repo that you can go and look at and view. All those recordings are up on YouTube. So if you want to play catch up and hang out with us this year, you can join the Commitmas Slack channel that we've got going on. So a lot of people in there that are willing to help. And we've sort of organized this around working together this year. So last year was really get Git installed, get a repo created, clone it, put some stuff in there, practice putting stuff in there, doing merges. So now this year we've organized teams. So we've got, as of right now, we've got an Ansible team. We have a Chef team, a Puppet team, a Python team, and a PowerShell or PowerCLI team that's all organized in that Slack group for Commitmas. So if there's something, a technology you want to learn in addition to Git, or maybe you want to focus on Git and work on a technology you're already comfortable with, we've got a bunch of different teams there to help you just sort of work with people and talk through how you're going to work together in Git. So that's communication's a huge part of it as well. So with that, our first Commitmas episode of the year. Taylor, I'm going to go ahead and make you presenter.
All right.
As soon as I remember where to click. All right, you should have that now.
So thank you, Jonathan. Just a very humbled to be kicking off this year's Commitmas, something I've been kind of found out about last year in January, February, and kind of missed out on the fun. So this was something I was very looking forward to, and I popped my head up a couple months ago and was out on Twitter just asking if this was going to happen again. And of course, a few of the guys were like, "Yeah, sure. Would you like to volunteer?" So here I am, helping kick this off. So just a quick note about me. So I'm very much coming from the ops side of things. I kind of got my roots in enterprise IT. Same as most of the folks probably on this call, virtualization, storage, consulting, and you know that is kind of led me down a path here in the recent years with some of the things that my clients have been asking me to do, get closer to helping application developers become more nimble and help speed up development processes through orchestrating and automating the back-end storage and compute resources. So this is very, very pertinent to me, learning more about the ecosystem that developers play in on a daily basis. And that's, you know, one of the things we're going to talk about tonight is how do we as ops guys, you know, what are the things that the resources that we can bring to bear to both help our fellow, other folks that are in the same area, other network engineers, other storage engineers and consultants, and bring them more into play in the DevOps-y kind of things. So one of the things that I'm doing within the company that I currently work for, I'm currently chief architect inside of a consulting company in Atlanta. We've got probably 80 consultants. 60 of those are on the network and storage side, and a lot of them this isn't even on their radar, right? And in the last couple of months, I've done a few things to help drive an interest in some of these folks to learn more about scripting, more about version control around scripting, even for network engineers, trying to get them to use version control for network device configurations and tracking changes on device configuration. So this is something I'm very passionate about and I'm doing on a day-to-day basis and trying to convert the traditional ops teams. So, like I said, current state of, traditional, the operations folks, a lot of the guys that I'm currently working with, even like within the customers I'm working with, they're still kind of stuck in that artisanal world. A lot of them still provision server storage, even provisioning VMs, not necessarily by building up, separate VMs from scratch, but they're still using templates, but they're still doing everything in a mouse clicker kind of world. Going through and using GUIs to do all their day-to-day tasks with little knowledge of any kind of scripting language. A lot of these guys came up through the roots of managing managing infrastructure on a day-to-day basis, and not having any kind of computer science background, or some of these folks are very much coming from a Windows world. They're not used to creating bash shell scripts in Linux and things of that nature. So it's very tough sometimes to get them to relate to where you want them to go. And at the same time, as businesses are becoming more forward-thinking and trying to bring dev and ops closer together, it sometimes could be a little hard to get these guys to see the forest for the trees. It's hard to get them to see the business value chain. So, like I said, I've been working really closely with my coworkers and just trying to instill some empathy within the ops teams towards developers and bridge those relationships. It's one thing that I notice a lot, even with my customers. You have these separate application development teams, and the day-to-day IT ops folks, they don't talk to one another. So even just going and creating a relationship with one of the developers and then taking them to lunch with like the storage guy and getting them to relate and talk to each other about their day-to-day, a lot of times that creates a lot of fruit that they can then bring back into their business on how the two of them can collaborate and bring a lot of value. So what do we do about it? One of the things that I'm doing is I'm trying to get the network engineers, for instance, a lot of what they're doing on the network side, the traditional kind of Cisco type network engineers are starting to see things like Cisco ACI and some of the software-defined networking technologies come to bear. A lot of those are based in Python, so I'm trying to get them to pick up Python skills and get them to learn a scripting language like that. Outside of that, VMware administrators, we talked about, having a Power CLI team this year, trying to get them to pick up PowerShell and use it on a daily basis. So that's where I'm starting, is just trying to evangelize, use scripting languages, try not to do everything in a GUI. Try to get out of that habit. Try to always think about, okay, if I'm doing something that's going to be repeatable, how can I actually script that and use a scripting language? And like Jonathan mentioned, this year with Commitmas 3, we have a number of groups. There's like 5 different teams within the Slack group this year. 2 of those are actually catered towards scripting languages, so PowerShell and Python. So that'd be a good start for folks that don't necessarily have that background. You can learn Git on a day-to-day basis throughout December, but you can also flex your muscles around learning PowerShell and Python. So what do you do with the next step after learning a scripting language is getting these guys to learn to collaborate and share their code. The next step really is having them learn version control and having them understand why they need to use version control and what version control really is. One of the ways that the easiest way I've been able to relate this to these folks is through just using Dropbox as an example, right? The version history within Dropbox is a type of version control. So explaining to them, how this should work is very similar to how you would save documents and different revisions of documents in Dropbox. So, if you've already looked at the version history in Dropbox, the file names are the same, right? It's just a matter of, adding or removing just a certain number of bytes within the file. You're not actually saving the same file over and over again, right? This is good version control. This is not good version control. We've seen this from time to time, right? Everybody's gone out to their local file shares or home directories within their organization and seen folks save the same file over and over again with the different name. That's just bad practice. And getting ops guys to understand how to manage their scripts through version control, this is a good example of what to do and what not to do. So, after explaining version control, there is what tools can we bring to bear? Git's obviously one of them, but there's a lot of confusion when we start talking to guys around Git versus GitHub. And even myself, when I first heard of this, I was very confused. I thought Git was like a client specifically for GitHub. I didn't really understand the difference between the two. So then, relaying to these guys to use Git, it's very important for them to understand they need to be using this for just local version control first. Don't even worry about GitHub. Just download Git and use that to manage code locally. So when learning Git, it's really good to go out there and find a good cheat sheet. So this is one that I actually use, the Rebel Labs cheat sheet. It does a really good job of kind of showing the workflow and giving an idea of all the different commands. There are varying different cheat sheets out there, but I highly recommend that folks, if they're going to use Git or teach somebody how to use Git, go find a good cheat sheet first and put this in front of them. And with this, you can actually teach them how to instantiate a Git repo and how to add files to it, some of the basics, and then they can use this to start learning some of the more advanced commands. So I did want to really kind of reiterate, a lot of the basics. This was kind of done really well last year. Anthony did an awesome video. He kind of went through the four main, basic commands: init, add, commit, and push. I highly suggest, folks, if you haven't actually watched any of the videos from last year, and if you don't have time to watch all 30, this is probably one of the better ones to go to first if you're looking for a good primer. So once we teach the ops folks how to use Git, the next thing is getting them to use some sort of online repository or just a way to share. And then for me, one of the struggles is getting these guys to understand why, right? And it's part of being a community. It's a way to give back to other folks that are also learning, and you're only going to get out of it what you put into it. So it's really important to get them to understand, look, you're going out there and spending all this time creating these awesome scripts for deploying new network devices, doing full stack vSphere deployments, etc. It'd be awesome if you were actually to be able to share this and collaborate with other folks on it and allow them to extend your creation, and at the same time use GitHub and these online repositories to do the same, right? Go out there. Don't necessarily always think that you have to create everything from scratch. These are great repositories for you to be able to go out and pull stuff down that other folks have already created, and not to start from scratch. GitHub is also very important from just a social media-ish platform. Job searchers are looking at this very heavily. I actually sat through an awesome presentation from Career Builder about a year and a half ago. They've created an analytics engine that goes out and pulls people's online profiles from LinkedIn, from Facebook, from Twitter, and even GitHub and Bitbucket, and et cetera. And they figured out a way to link up, if there's a John Smith in New York City, right, and he has a GitHub account and a LinkedIn account, they would figure out a way to link the two together to basically create an online CV. And then take that data and then pass it back to job seekers. Job seekers know that our job searchers, the employers know that the best person for a given job is probably not one that's going to be looking for a job. So they're really relying on things like GitHub and other social media accounts to go find those resources. And GitHub's an awesome way to share your talent and potentially put yourself out there for your next big gig. So GitHub Alternatives, this was actually pretty big for us as an organization. As I started getting more and more of the ops guys involved in using Git and a version control repository, some of the stuff that we've created was not stuff that our management necessarily wanted us to share, or it had IP inside of it that was related to a given customer. GitHub will allow you at least one private repository in their free account, but even then, it got down to the point where a lot of guys were having trouble managing that. So what we did internally is we deployed something called GitLab, which is a separate project that works very, very similar to GitHub. It's actually kind of cool. It's some of the terminology is a little bit different, and they've got some add-ons from a collaboration and project management perspective. But GitLab does a great job of allowing us to install they have a community edition that we've installed internally. and we can publish out repos externally, publicly, same as we would with GitHub. But GitLab Community Editions is free and allows us as an organization to, have more of those private repositories. And unfortunately, when you're doing consulting, you're working with a lot of clients, some of that stuff actually has to remain private. So this gives me a way, at least, to evangelize the use of Git internal to the organization, get guys interested in it, and then they can then turn around and go and create GitHub accounts and share some of the non-proprietary things in GitHub. Some of the others, Bitbucket, Visual Studio Team Services. A lot of the Microsoft guys now are using Visual Studio Code for just PowerShell scripting. Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio Team Services, they all use Git at a base level, which is awesome, right? You don't have to actually go and learn a new version control system to be able to use these different online repositories. They all use the basics of Git. So sometimes this is not even enough. It takes a little bit more convincing. So getting down to real-world use cases is very important for evangelizing the use of tools like Git. One of the things that I've been able to do recently with some of our network guys is show them the power of using Git diff. I mean, some of these guys have Notepad++ and different text editors that can do this, but doing it over a given period of time and actually seeing the differences between network device configs, Git diff is awesome at doing that. So it's just being able to create these use cases and show them how to use Git in different ways is helped a lot. Some other ways I've seen Git and GitHub being used, they're a little odd. I myself I went to college and got a degree in computer engineering, focusing on embedded systems, and a lot of what I did coming out of school initially was PCB design, and I've seen a lot of guys now that are doing more of the IoT and electronics maker kind of things. They're using GitHub to store PCB designs, right? Adafruit, some of the other folks like that sell, Arduinos and Raspberry Pis, some of the open source hardware devices that are out there. Those folks are actually posting those PCB designs, firmware, CAD files for 3D printer designs, et cetera. They're using GitHub for those sorts of things too. So it's not just being used as a code repository; it's being used for a repository and version control for other things, which is pretty neat. So I'm going to bounce out of this real quick and just do a real quick demo just around Git diff for those that have never seen this before. So I'm just going to go down the command line. I've got a file out here. It's just a configuration file. It's part of a default configuration for a Nexus 5548. I'm actually going to create a new, call this, new Nexus config. Create a new directory. Oops, sorry. So used to Linux command line. All right, so I have a new directory here with that config inside of it. So one of the first things I need to do if I want to start tracking this from a version control perspective is create a Git repository. So I'm going to do a git init first to initialize my repository. All right. Then I want to add this file into my Git repo. So one of the things you can do is just do a git add period, which adds all the files in this given directory or any new files into the repo. All right. Yep, so there's the file. Then I want to do an initial commit. So this is going to take this file that I've just added and create an initial checkpoint, per se. All right. All right, cool. So I've got the file in there. I've got the first commit done. Now, if I were to go into this file and make some changes, say, I messed up and removed jumbo frames. Probably not a good thing, right? Now that I've made that change, I can actually do a git diff, and git diff will tell me exactly what changes I've made since my last checkpoint, my last commit. This is fantastic, right? I mean, if you've gone out to a customer and you've done an initial config, you can take and download, dump the config to a local directory on your machine. You come back 6 months later and want to know it's changed. Download the latest config from the device to and copy it over the file that you already had down, and then do a git diff, and then all of a sudden now you can see all the changes that your customers possibly made, right? Customer encounters a problem and they're blaming you. It's an awesome way to CYA. Say, you know what, I didn't make that change. So this is just one of the ways. You can also, you notice here, this is kind of color coded as well. Red is for something's been removed. If I were to go and add a line, let's go down here, maybe just add a new VLAN. Right. Right. Whenever you add something or change something, it comes back color coded in green. So pretty neat concept, and so a good way to kind of evangelize the use of Git for network engineers, network consultants. All right. Bounce back into the PowerPoint here. All right. So what's next, right? After you've brought the folks kicking and screaming into using scripting and then even using Git, right? Where do they go from here? One of the things that they can do is start to learn an orchestration platform, right? And that's something we're trying to do this year with Commitmas as well. We have 3 teams out there, one for Puppet, Chef, and Ansible. I myself is actually going to be participating in Team Chef with my coworker and buddy Jesse Anderson. It's something we've looked at quite a bit and are starting to use, orchestrating some of our cloud platforms and some of the platforms we have from our customers. So this is a way for us to kind of sharpen our skills and also help teach others. And there's bound to be others that are coming to the table with questions that they don't understand. So it's a good way for us to learn even more by teaching others how to use Chef. And even going further than that, so Git's used all over the place, right? It's not just used with repositories for code. The Git framework is being used now for things like Docker, right? Docker has a Docker hub or container repository that leverages Git for tracking changes on containers that you create. There are also microservices platforms. Heroku is fantastic. I've actually used Heroku, and you've noticed Heroku is being used for signing up to the Commitmas Slack group, but I've used Heroku to create chat bots, any kind of like microservice that I need to throw out there to run to collect data, move data around. It's great for that, and it also relies on Git. So as you're creating your scripts and pushing them out to Heroku, you're doing all that using the same kind of Git framework that you would use in pushing code up to GitHub. Last but not least, right, you can always go out there and contribute to an open source project. And that's kind of the next wave after learning all these different tools is really kind of sharpening your skills from a development standpoint and getting more involved with a development project. So Jonathan, that's really all I had. See if there are any questions out there. I'd be more than happy to address those.
Live audience, do you have any questions for Taylor? Question box is reasonably clean right now. I don't see too much on Twitter. For folks too, just to sort of piggyback off of your last slide there a bit, if there's projects that you do want to contribute to, maybe you're still learning Python and you're not comfortable contributing code to a project, there's a lot of good use cases around contributing to documentation. So that's another use case that a lot of documentation actually resides on GitHub as well. So if you find an error in some documentation, there's a good chance it's just a repo you can clone, make the change, and you can put a pull request in to have that update added. I've had a couple land in the Ansible documentations as I was going through and trying to learn stuff. I'm like, oh, that's changed since the last version. That's not the right command anymore. And, it's another way you can contribute to a project, maybe while you're honing those development skills. I know I don't have them, so I contribute to documentation when I can.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've found a lot of instances where folks have some awesome code in their repositories, and even like their readme.md file, their markdown file that is the first file that comes up when you open a repository on GitHub. Even those are pretty much blank. I mean, I came across one recently where a gentleman had created a shared library, shared DLL for there were PowerShell commandlets he had actually created using the .NET code for Windows 10 IoT to interface with the GPIO pins on Raspberry Pi. Something this awesome use case, right? I mean, you can actually do get input, get output on the GPIO pins on Raspberry Pi, and he hadn't documented any of it. So just committing back to that and throwing out some documentation on his repository just to kind of help him and help drive folks to his site even. It's just another way to contribute.
And then there's those of us that have actually migrated off of WordPress to using, I use Jekyll and GitHub pages for my blog now.
Yeah, so great way to practice as well for, post Commitmas. Obviously, we've got a lot going on for the next month. But if you want to, I sort of did the same thing. I followed Cody's footsteps and moved my blog over to GitHub pages. So if I want to add a blog, I'm in there doing, adding files, tracking files, committing them, pushing them up. I still write pretty horrible commit messages. I have to go back and watch last year's Commitmas episode on good commit messages. So make sure you do that as well. We did have a question come up in chat. Can you talk about what microservices is?
Sure. So it gets confused a lot with containers, and with things like Docker, right? I mean, you're installing Docker on a Linux host or even a Windows host now, and then running containers on top of that operating system, right? With things like microservices, you can create your own Python script, Java, small Java applet, etc., and deploy it out to Heroku or Microsoft Functions, AWS Lambda, and not have to worry about managing the Docker layer, right? It still almost works like a container where you're not having to necessarily worry about the OS per se, right? You're pulling in just the piece of code that you want and maybe all the libraries around that and deploying it out to Heroku and not having to worry about managing the container or scaling out the container, etc. So it's kind of the next thing past containers, the next abstraction layer, say. Yeah. So a lot of folks that are getting involved, like Amazon Echo development, have started using AWS Lambda and some of the things that are out on the AWS marketplace that pull into Lambda to extend functionality for the Echo. That's actually one of the ways I got into it, initially, and then doing chatbot development, I'm using Heroku for a lot of that. So using a Heroku microservice, it's online all the time, waiting for some sort of interrupt or some sort of trigger. It's waiting for that input, and then we'll act on that through the script that you have on the microservice. least it's my understanding of it, right? I mean, I'm not going to claim to be a huge expert in microservices, but that's been my experience around it.
Cool. Well, it looks like that's all the live questions we've got. Cody, you've got any parting shots?
Other than to just get started, just like start doing the things. Make your a bunch of years ago when we were starting to talk about PowerShell and PowerCLI, and like you guys need to really start looking into this to start doing the thing. Or when I give a talk around VCO, one of the best ways, and like Commitmas is a great resource, but you're only going to get out of it the effort. I think we said this earlier too. You're only going to get out the effort you put in, right? And so forcing yourself to do this, even if it is for minor text edits on a project, or hey, get in and clone the repo and watch that first video. But forcing yourself to do it, to make it a deliberate practice, is going to, I guess that's all I have.
Awesome. Taylor, thank you very much.
Also, sorry, this last comment. It's just kind of contagious, right? I mean, once you start working on this with, a couple folks, especially I've seen this internally in our organization, right? Other folks want to be a part of it, right? It's something that can grow organically that way.
Cool. Well, if that's all we've got, we can wrap up. Of course, you can find this if you're not on live and you're listening to my voice, you're probably listening via YouTube or iTunes, or you can check out vBrownBag.com, where we also post all of the recordings. Taylor, thanks for coming on and kicking off Commitmas with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.